Hello and welcome to Systemize Your Success. Today I'm joined by Dr. Rachael Coates, who's a serial entrepreneur while working as a full-time colorectal surgeon. Her story is truly inspiring, and today we went really deep onto some of the more challenging decisions we have to make as business owners and entrepreneurs about how to get the best out of our abilities, but then also be aware of the limitations that we have and when it's time to actually think about handing over the reins to somebody else to allow our businesses to grow. We talk about systems, we talk about time management, we talk about staff and about how to build a business that serves you and your life goals. And all this in an incredible and inspiring episode. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. So the question is this: how do entrepreneurs like us who don't have an endless supply of cash, how do we leverage the best apps, virtual assistants, automation tools and systems to scale our businesses, increase our profits and have more time to do what we love to do each day? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name's Dr. Steve Day and this is Systemize Your Success. Hello and welcome to Systemize Your Success. Today I'm joined by Dr. Rachael Coates, and this is someone who I wanted to interview for quite some time. She's actually been a client of mine for many years, and we'll get into that later. But the reason I wanted to share her story with you is I think it's utterly inspiring as what she manages to achieve in any given working week, and it puts the rest of us to shame. And so this is, I think, going to be an incredibly inspiring, I hope useful interview, which is going to give insights into how you can get a lot more done in the time you have available for work just by thinking about the way you work, who you work with, the systems you use, obviously. And yeah, let's just go for it and take it from there. Welcome, Rachael.
Oh, thanks, Dave.
Cool. So do you want to just give us a little 2-minute intro into, you know, who you are, where you're at with now, what you do as on your average daily week, that makes no sense, but your average week and the businesses you have and what your work life looks like at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, first and foremost, I'm a colorectal surgeon. I'm doing a robotic fellowship at the moment, so that is what I do in my, I'd say 9 to 5, but it's probably a lot longer hours than that each week, and I do that full time. And for the last 10 years, I've also run businesses in parallel to doing that. So being in a general surgical training program, and it all came about essentially. I found business, I'm going to say by accident. I was essentially making myself a second job, so I started a Botox and fillers clinic. Tried to expand that by training someone, had difficulty with retention, and then got back into what had been kind of one of my original loves, I guess, which was property. And at the time I got into property, I had no cash because I was on maternity leave. So my, very supportive husband was like, I'm absolutely not interested in buying houses. We're both doctors, we've got other things going on. So you can do what you want, but you do it with the money that you have in your bank account. And I was like, well, hold on, I'm on maternity leave. I haven't actually got any money in my bank account. It's overdrawn. So I was faced with this dilemma of, I knew a little bit about property. I'd had HMOs in the past. I'd, bought and sold houses. And I knew that I loved that side of things. But I also knew that I didn't have like the money to put a deposit and buy a house. So I started looking at other ways in which I could get back into property, and really found rent to rent. And then within rent to rent, found that the area that I live in is not necessarily the best area for things like HMOs and other things. So I then wanted to do rent to service accommodation, essentially. And there was nobody providing service accommodation management in the location that I had these rent to rents. So then I obviously, as you do, set up a service accommodation management company, starting out with just my own properties. It's expanded, and this was back in 2016. I think we registered the company. That was while I was getting the rent to rent sorted out, and then actually started properly trading in 2017. And then I went back to work, obviously, because I was just on maternity leave. I ran that with a VA from the Philippines. And I think I don't know whether I met you when I already had that VA. I think I had 2 VAs when I first met you. But systems, obviously, when you're working in a hybrid team or a remote team, are really, really important. So then went back to work, ran it with a VA. It grew a little bit, and then came back off on another maternity leave. And at that point, I got an office in the UK and really expanded the business. And I say expanded, it's still all very much based in our geographical area, but expanded the number of properties, expanded the team, actually very briefly took on a business partner who then left. And yeah, it's grown over the years, and now we're still small, but obviously turnover is much better now, and we're continuing to grow, and we've re-linked in with the systems, because I think at each stage of growth, then you need, upgrade of systems, and also you need to improve the people that you've got working for you. There's a whole load of things that you need to do, but I found that as the hybrid team has grown, our original systems were either disbanded or, no longer fit for purpose. And so we've had to evolve to try and improve them, really in preparation for the next big expansion. And then somewhere in amongst the second maternity leave, I started another business, which is essentially a nanny agency, and that has spawned, we have a play cafe now, we have mum and baby classes, and in-home childcare and nanny training, essentially. So that also has run intermittently as a hybrid team with VAs from the Philippines, and we have a UK-based office for that too.
Cool. So basically you've got two fully fledged businesses alongside your full-time colorectal surgery career. So,
yeah, and at the moment, unfortunately, I'm still sort of acting as managing director for both them businesses, although we've got a couple of people in training that hopefully I can hand the reins to in the not too distant future.
yeah, and I think you alluded to that, but when we met, I remember quite clearly, because you, as you said, were on maternity leave and you already got a few properties, you had a couple of assistants in place, and we had a conversation, and I remember somewhere along the lines you saying, look, I've basically got, I think it was about 6 months left, maybe 5 months left. I've got to get this now because I want to keep growing this business after I go back on from maternity leave back to my full-time job. So I guess one of the things, I mean, if you forget what else you were doing on the side, like having a career, but just like thinking about the business, like at that point then when you'd already gone that big step of taking on staff, whether they're virtual or otherwise, but you got people in that were helping you, and the fact they're in the Philippines obviously complicates things a little bit, makes it somewhat more challenging working people remotely in some respects. But what was it then that you felt you needed some help in actually getting things done differently? What was it you were looking to actually achieve by working with us, and ultimately what was lacking in what you had set up already, and what were the benefits of actually working with us, and then how did that help you go forward, not specifically to big up us, but just to give people an idea of what the kind of systems and things and things you felt you need, and what worked and what didn't.
Yeah, so like most entrepreneurs, I'm easily distractible, full of good ideas, and actually they're things that get a business off the ground, but they're not necessarily things that give a business long-term success or stability. So what I felt that I needed to plug into every aspect of the business really was the right framework to grow upon. So I'd got the business to a point at which it was functioning, but there was a hole starting to appear. So, you're dropping a ball here, there was a problem there. It was becoming increasingly difficult to respond timely to things. And so I knew that in order to get them things better, we needed a better framework, but we also needed probably more bums on seats. We needed, a more regular maintenance person, maybe someone in the office here, maybe somebody that could get on a phone more easily than we could do that from the Philippines with the staff that I had. And if I wanted to pay for more staff, then I was going to have to essentially grow the business, because the slight difference from the way that I started these businesses, because they were essentially completely from scratch, so startups, they weren't funded, so I self-funded them. But certainly the property one, I started with nothing really, I think £1,500. So you can imagine it's a super tight budget. So from day one, you've really got to be earning money and generating positive cash flow. And to do that in a business is difficult. And a lot of entrepreneurs will do that by, say, sacrificing, salaries, whatever. I had to pay people from pretty much day one because I was, not available to work full time in the business. So it does, in some respects, it can slow growth, but it also means that you've got to have your systems right, because you can't afford to be, feeding the business cash all of the time. So, you know, the financial systems had to be right, the operations, like the product side of it had to be right. There had to be someone available for the customer service, because, you know, in service accommodation, essentially, you know, it's in tourism, and, you know, it's actually really difficult to maintain high customer satisfaction, especially if you're not got somebody on the ground making sure that the properties are immaculate, that everything runs smoothly, you know. And so I was at that point running a cleaning team. So I've tried both my internal cleaning teams. We've had external contractors. But at that point in time, we had essentially housekeepers that were doing a great job. But then further down the line, that became another rate limiting step, because they were doing the laundry. And actually, there's only so much laundry you can do in somebody's home. So I needed all of these systems to be upgraded, because although them systems were exactly what I needed at the beginning to keep costs low, they weren't feasible to grow. And I was in a really uncomfortable position where we were small enough to have a lot of pain, because we didn't have the staff cushion, but we weren't big enough to really employ the staff. So it's, how do you get over that hump? And we've met a few humps along the way, and I'm sure loads of businesses have these. You know, things like the VAT threshold, and, you know, there's just every bit of growth, you get a new set of challenges. And I think, you know, you do end up redoing the systems, but the bits and bobs of systems that I put in to begin with, just off my own back, you then sort of gave me extra clarity on being a little bit more, I guess, didactic to get consistent results. And also made me accountable to delegate appropriately, because I think it's really, really easy as a busy, chaotic person to say, oh, just do this. And you actually haven't provided even a portion of the information that is required for somebody to remotely successfully complete that task. And that isn't their failure, that's your failure. But I think until you really get into the system side of things, it can be very frustrating, and you just think it's somebody else's failure, and you don't actually sit to look at, okay, well, how can I facilitate them doing this successfully, essentially.
Yeah, totally. I can resonate with all of that. I mean, essentially, that's why I started or got into doing what I do now, is because I did exactly that. I used to throw stuff at people and expect them to be able to just deal with it. And when it came back not done quite the way I wanted to, or not at all the way I wanted it done, or took 10 times longer than I expected, you've got to just look internally and blame yourself. Unfortunately, there's no one else there to blame.
And I think sometimes you can get that employee that does all of that for you, and really, like, you know, it takes the heat off you, but they're so few and far between that you can't build a business on it alone. You've got to have something else there, haven't you, to pick. Like, essentially, I think it raises like the lowest common denominator. So what you're doing is you're putting systems in to say this is the minimum standard that we're going to operate upon, but it doesn't take them, people that are like the entrepreneurs and the people that actually have got ideas, it doesn't take their autonomy away. So I think that it's really important, and I've made this mistake a little bit with some VAs, where you get them into a highly structured system and then take away their feeling of autonomy. So it's a fine balance, but I'd much rather have that lowest common denominator settled, and then try and encourage people to bring forward ideas and thoughts and their own imagination into the business once we know that the business is actually going to run.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good insight, and one that definitely took me quite a few years to get right. I'm still working on these things day to day, but the idea of, the way I see it is, there's a bunch of stuff that happens in the business that it's got to happen. Like, it's got to get done. And as you say, as long as it's done to the lowest common denominator, the lowest standard, like as long as it is done to that, the business will still function, create profit. And then everything that happens on top of that is sort of a bonus. And, you know, I always try and hire the best people possibly can. But ultimately, if you can lower that bar to entry by making it super simple to do all of the core necessary work, then when you do get somebody that comes in who has got something about them, who has, you know, the initiative to actually want to actually improve stuff, and then you facilitate that. And we have things like, we have our sharpen your work task, which is like something we assign to people, and it's meant to happen on a weekly or a monthly basis, and they're meant to look at the work they're doing and say, how could I improve this? Could we eliminate it? Could we streamline it? Could we automate it? And ultimately, what I've noticed is certain people love that kind of work, and other people kind of ignore it or skirt around it. And it's a really good way of sort of picking up on the people who are actually like, they genuinely get something out of making the work they do better. And it's those ones then you elevate up and put time and effort in. But not to say that you don't need the other work doing. You just don't need to have a team of innovators. You just need to be able to get everything done, and then spot when you have got an innovator, someone who's really, you know, switched on and excited about improvement, and then bring them up and focus a different amount of energy onto that person.
Yeah, I think that stability allows them a platform on which then they can start to like shine. But otherwise, I think I've had it on the flip side where you get somebody in that's very capable, but they're constantly having to pick up the problems, and therefore they're reactive rather than proactive. So that every day spent firefighting, and they can't excel in that environment, and nobody can really excel in that environment, because actually the amount of real active work that's getting done is next to nothing. You're just constantly reacting to a problem here and a problem there. And so it's the systems are what I think differentiate small in a small business, the ones that are reactive and the ones that are proactive, and the ones that can then go on to do much bigger things.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. And one of the things that I systemized quite early on was the communications management, so all my emails and instant messaging and all the rest of it coming in. And it's not to say that I exclude or have excluded myself entirely from that process. There's stuff that comes in that I still I'm a party to, and we're amending and improving their process all the time. But what it allowed me to be confident with was that a lot of that firefighting stuff, we're actually picking up on it and building systems around it. And so over the course of, you know, a few months or longer, then a lot of the stuff that we were just previously, we were just like reactive, deal with it, move on. We're now, because we actually had a system around, okay, we've got this problem now, how do we deal with it? How do we document it? And then make sure that next time it comes up, either we can eliminate it so it doesn't happen again, or next time it does come up, we already know what we're going to do. So we don't need anybody with a brain almost to think about it, because we can actually create a little system around it. And that iterative, basically building of all the systems to deal with all the reactive firefighting is what, like exactly what you just described. It empowers the people like and yourself to have more time and headspace to think about, you know, more higher value work or systems improvement or growth or whatever it is.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. What's next for you then? Like, obviously you've got the nursery, the cafes, you've got the service accommodation business and the colorectal work. But with regards to your businesses, like you mentioned about finding managing directors. I mean, how's that working, and what's the plan for getting that into place to remove you from, you know, as much of it as you can as possible? Because that's obviously a dream for most people, and I'll hold my hands up in many aspects of the current coaching business. I'm going through this process too as well, and trying to remove myself more and more from the day-to-day, because I want to be in that position of being able to be the strategist entirely, and or start other ventures like you have. And so what tips can you provide, or insights into doing that? What's worked so far? What you're hoping will come to be over the next few weeks, months, whatever it is?
Well, the strategy that I'm employing at the moment, I haven't tried to recruit externally for the managing director role. So it's kind of homegrown talent, and it's a slow burn. So I had a business partner in the nanny agency who left 13 months ago after she had a baby. So I think just essentially that wasn't where her priorities lay anymore. And so I came to this crossroads. Do I continue the business? Do I sell the business? Do I fold the business? You know, like where do I go with this? Because it was a business that was started 50-50, and it was her passion project. And I was coming at it as an investor with business experience that was essentially a little bit like an angel, but I did play a very active role. So I was then left with, you know, she'd resigned as director, you know, I very gracefully handed her shares back. So I now had 100% ownership of a company that, you know, I have children, I have 3 children, but it's not a company that I would have started if I had chosen any company to start, if that makes sense. But I see massive potential in the company. So I felt at that point, I looked at the families that we do childcare for, and it's just such a niche market, and it was based on what myself and my husband needed, because we're both surgeons, and we really couldn't get that flexible wraparound childcare, somebody that would stay as late as we needed them to, someone that can come at 6 or half 6 in the morning, that can occasionally do night shifts, that can do some weekends. And so the business was built around flexibility for working professionals and modern day life. And then I looked at it and said, you know, all of the families that use us really need us. And then I looked at all the nannies and all of the people that we've employed and stuff over the years. And I thought, you know, like, they were also providing, you know, jobs and opportunities. And, you know, I'm huge about personal development and growth. And I was like, you know, we're giving something here that's important and matters. So I said, no, I can't give up on this. And I looked then at the future and said, I can see huge potential for it as a company. And what I really want for the company is for it to become a marketplace for everything for the family. So hence we've then started, subsequent to the in-home childcare, we've started play cafes. And I hate soft play, and I don't know how other parents feel about soft play, but I hate going and sitting on a plastic chair, not being able to see my children very like easily, not knowing if they're being beaten up by like the local thug kid, or, you know, what's going on behind the like big pillars of soft play, and then having rubbish coffee. And I just find the whole experience stressful. I wanted somewhere that almost felt more like a Costa, but where there's sufficient entertainment for young children, that they would not be in my hair, and I could enjoy myself and they could enjoy themselves. The food was good, the coffee's good, etc. So that's what we built, based entirely selfishly on something that I couldn't find local to me that I wanted. And that's going really well. And we do events and things like that in the cafe for it's predominantly for 6 and under. So it's for that preschool kind of early years, where we do a lot of the in-home stuff for as well. And then we've built on top of that, we've built in like the baby classes. And it's my hope that in the future, rather than going to, for example, childcare.co.uk to look for a nanny, and then going to some, you know, online shop to find a STEM toy for your child, and then going somewhere else to go, you know, go and have a nice coffee, you can essentially just connect with UNA, and we will, because we vet and DBS check and train, and, you know, we take care of the thinking so that you can go without stress and access whichever service you want, and have good quality service that's built around modern family life and meets all your needs. So my aim really is, in the next 3 to 5 years, the current manager of the business is to build her up into a shareholder and into a managing director as we grow, because she showed great promise at the moment. And I've got a fantastic assistant manager that is, so they're doing skills development. So I give them projects which I'm sure they love. So for example, they're reading the Effective Manager, and they're looking at how they can implement that at the moment with the staff that they manage, so the ones that they are direct line managers of. So we do these side like managerial projects and personal development projects, so that I hope that they are then ready to step into these like bigger roles. And my personal aim is to franchise elements of this, such as the baby classes and the play cafes, become national. And then ultimately, I personally would like an exit, because it's not that I don't believe in the business. I think the business is going to be fantastic, but I am quite committed to being, you know, a full-time robotic surgeon. I therefore think that there's going to come a point at which I've got to hand the reins of this over. It's no longer, you know, my brainchild. It's now actually something much bigger than I can ever take it to, because it's got potential for not just national but international presence. And, you know, that isn't something I would need to give up everything else I did to push that forward, and also go on a learning curve. Like, I've never taken a business internationally. I've never taken a business to them kind of figures. So I think, to be fair to the business, there's a point at which I need to step back from that and acknowledge where my skill set lies, which is probably in the startup scale-up space, and hopefully hand it over to somebody that can drive it to its fullest potential. And that's where I see UNA going, in a very, very long-winded fashion. Sorry.
No, that's fantastic, fascinating. And I think what I took from that is that you've got an incredibly clear plan about what the objective is for the business, and you've been very self-aware to say that, look, it would be nice, if you could do everything, but actually there's going to be a point where you're going to be holding the business back. And for it to grow to the scale that you believe it can, it's got to be, you've got to hand the reins over. It's interesting, like when you say, what I wanted to pick up on and ask you a bit more about, when you say exit, is that the point where you will exit entirely, do you think, as in sell the company, or exit as a active member and just be a, what's the word? Not a backseat driver, that's the wrong thing, but so it's a silent partner. That's the type of word I was looking for. Someone who, retain ownership, but not actually be an active CEO role or in the actual operations.
So at the moment, I've got 100% ownership, and I don't see that as viable in the long term.
No.
But also there's the skill sets missing. And I would imagine the best thing I could do was fully exit the company, providing there was caretakers in place that I felt were going to, essentially had a positive vision for the company moving forward. I think that, you have in your head an idyllic exit, don't you? I think I would struggle to exit the company to a company that were just going to absorb it and then not honour what UNA's about, which is that flexible, trustworthy sort of life, like education for the youngsters. If they can't honour that and they just want to absorb it because it's a competitor, I'd struggle to sell it for that reason. But I think that hopefully it's got an exit for me where I can hand this over to somebody that takes it far further than I can. But the management team that I'm setting in place, I think are people that potentially would stay to sort of continue to drive that forward in some form, whether that be, a local managerial role or a regional managerial role, or, something bigger in the company. I think that depends on their own personal growth as well, because it's, it depends on I guess there's lots of factors in it, isn't there? And it's also what ends up being on the table. But my preference, I think, would be a complete exit. As one thing, Steve, I think is really important, and the older I get, the more sharply I'm focused on the fact that I do far too much. And so I mean, this has been the story of my life. It's not an unusual thing. And I think because I've got a really high threshold for work, is that the right way to put it? Essentially, I love to work, and I work most hours of the day in some format or other, and I feel really agitated when I'm not working. But I think what you can do is you can work in the wrong way. So you can get distracted, you can chase shiny pennies, you can reduce your focus. And what you do is you massively reduce your effectiveness. So by splitting your attention into two, you don't halve your effectiveness, you like quarter it or something, and you become a bit of a firefighter. And it actually reduces your ability to do the things that you're passionate about in the first place, which is like the strategy and building things and making things brilliant. And so for me, part of me trying to really niche down is I know where I want to go with UNA. I've got a plan to exit, and that will reduce my attention on that thing. And with the property business, that's not something I ever intend to sell or exit. I intend to grow it to a size at which I can hopefully put a managing director in, but maintain sort of essentially continue to own the company, but as a shareholder as opposed to a director. And then really focus on, I think in the long term, doing my colorectal career alongside helping companies with the skills that I've built up over the years. So I absolutely love business, and I would never want to not be involved in business. But I don't think that the right thing for me is to be running full-time businesses and running, essentially working full-time as a surgeon. So it'd be great for me to then, I think I'd be taking on more NED roles, maybe as a bit of angel investing, and that type of work in the future with regards to business is something I'd be very interested in doing. But yeah, I think that's probably, 3 to 5 years in the future, once the companies are at the stage at which I can really take a very backseat or no role at all.
Wow, cool. Got a plan in place. I like it.
Always have a plan, Steve.
Yeah. One of the things I just wanted to circle back and pick up on, because I think it's something that selfishly I think I would quite like to know the answer to it, and but I'm sure other people might as well. And that's this decision you made to at the moment to train up your internal staff, and then you also mentioned about shares. So the options of, you know, looking from a perspective of how do you remove yourself from the day-to-day running, like, properly, not just the doing of the work, which I know you have, and hopefully many people listening have already done that. But is that removing yourself from either the managing director or the CEO or the COO, or whatever it is, whatever label you want to give it? And there's, you know, I talk about this a lot with fellow business people about, do you hire in at that point? As in, do you hire in somebody with the experience and the expertise, which comes with a price tag, which may have a different sort of view on the way a business should be run, that could potentially conflict some of the way things you set up, or like you've done. But obviously, to finish it, they would then bring in a wealth of skills and experience, which you may not, you know, you don't know what you don't know. And then the conversely is they bringing people up from the inside and training people up, and nurturing that person to become, you know, almost to emulate what you do in your absence. Do you see, like, obviously you must have had these thoughts and these questions in your own head, and what made you decide to go the path you've done, and do you think it's, you know, what are the pros and cons of both?
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting question, and I'm not saying that what I'm doing is the right answer. So I'll give you the rationale for what I'm doing at the moment. So I had a partner that was 50-50. And when I started that, I thought, okay, so even though I financed it and I bring sort of the business expertise, she brought the childcare expertise, and it was her passion project. And it's very much easy come, easy go, is the way I would describe it. So her shares didn't cost her anything. It cost her some time and effort, but actually it cost me the same. And when it came to walking away, I'm sure it wasn't a decision that was taken lightly, but it was also an opportunity worth, you know, tens of thousands of pounds, several years, a whole lot of mentoring from sort of me to her, that she was able to walk away from. So I'm under no illusions that giving shares is not something on its own that can hook somebody into your company for the long term, because I've heard that like battered around as, oh, I'm going to give this employee some shares and they're never going to leave. And I think that's really unrealistic way to approach it. But for me, it's about me showing a commitment to their evolution as you know, managers, and then potentially in the future as directors and things, is to me to say, okay, so I trust that if we hit this target, that you actually have earned not just a salary, but you've earned something greater than that. And for the two girls that we're going through this process with at the moment, they have got managerial experience, and they're doing their roles really well, and they've turned the company around to the tune of about £5,000 or £6,000 a month in you know, in as many months. And it's been a huge turnaround in terms of what they've achieved and the work ethic. Now, I think that the first target that I've given them for the shares should hopefully come to fruition in the next 3 months. And I hope what that does is then inspire them to continue to want to push for the same growth, because I think there are lots of people that are very good at execution and very good at working hard that don't have vision. And then there are people that have vision that I mean, I can't execute in my business because of my overcommitment to other things. It's not that you know, I'm work shy, but it's almost like trying to level a playing field. So they're getting a taste of, actually, if we can get this into a multi-million-pound company, at the point of exit, their shares are going to have more value to them than the salaries of, you know, many years that they could work for. So it's almost like a little bit of the fire that I have in my belly, he's a little bit for yours. And it might be coming from a different place, but I think it's important. And then, you know, on the other side of it, it's that recognition in me that of the value that they're providing to the company, and that they are invaluable at this point in time. Now, if I was to look at it another way, and I was to bring in a super expensive managing director from now, then that person would have a very short period of time in which to essentially grow their own salary into the company and make a success of the company. And whereas the girls know the company inside out, because actually a lot of the company decisions have been evolved from them, not just from myself. So, you know, that they are actually now intrinsically part of UNA. And I think that they may not have the managerial experience that, you know, some international managing director that would probably never come and work for us would. But they really hold the values of UNA. So what I'd like to do is take them as far as they can with like their skill set, and bring UNA on as far as it can. And then at the point at which their skill set either they can't or won't grow that any further, I think that's the point at which it would be the right decision for us to then look at bringing on another tier of management to really push. And you know, like, I acknowledge that if it was me, you know, I think that we can. I've done relatively, like, you know, elements of national expansion with the company. I think that's not something that's entirely impossible with my skill set. But the thought of taking something international, it becomes incredibly complicated, and there's so many, you know, moving parts, that I don't think that I have that. So I can't train them to do something I don't have a skill set of. So, you know, I very quickly become the rate limiting step in all of this, and we will certainly have to recruit expertise in. The question is, does that come at, you know, higher than the managerial level? Does it come in at a specific bit of expertise that we buy in? And how that looks in the future, I don't know. But one thing I would do, probably in the not too distant future, is consider putting like a board of NEDs together, because I think that's where you can very inexpensively plug in some of that expertise for very little cost. So, you know, in terms of monetary cost, you can either pay by the month, or actually there are NEDs with amazing skill sets that will work for sweat equity if they believe in your company. So, you know, I think that a couple of sweat equity NEDs that, you know,
Just non-executive directors.
Yeah, sorry, non-executive directors. So a couple that are prepared to put some time in up front for shares over the longer term, then, you know, we can probably bridge a lot of these skill sets to the point at which we're turning over sufficient money that we could potentially attract some top talent for moving forwards and expansion. That's the plan, you know. I mean, I'll let you know how that goes.
Oh, fantastic. Rachel, I could literally talk to you for hours about this, and we do talk regularly about stuff, but we all continue to do that off mic. But this has been absolutely fascinating. You know, I had no real preconceptions about what we were going to talk about today. I thought we'd just run with it and have a chat and see where it took us. But yeah, I've totally inspired by this. I really have, and I think that the stuff the detail you shared in your vision, the business plan, the vision, I think it's just, thank you. That's all I can say. Really enjoyed this, and I'm sure people listening will get huge amounts of value from actually getting a proper behind the scenes look into the thought processes and the decisions that, you know, a small business owner with ambition has to go through and is actually making actively. And really useful stuff, so thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve.
Rachel, if people want to find out about you, about whether it's about your agency, about UNA, or about, you know, just whatever else you're doing at the moment, how is the best place for them to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm regularly on LinkedIn, so you can find me. I think I'm at Dr Rachael Coates, or my new haunt is Twitter, so it's not something I've recently found, but I'm at Dr Rachael Coates on that as well. Rachel's got an AEL at the end, so or you can find us like on our website, so it's www.unanannies.co.uk. Yeah.
And it's UNA UNA
Nannies, yeah.
.co.uk. Fantastic. Yeah. Rachel, thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.